Welcome to my video based on the question, what is my definition of the digital era? Today's world relies heavily on the use of technology for everyday life. For younger generations such as myself, a digitalised world is all we have ever known. But what exactly does the term digital mean, and when did the digital era officially start? This video will explore 3 key points. What is digital? When did the digital era begin? And is the digital era rhetorical or analytical? Shepard states that the digital era is characterised by technology which increases the speed and breadth of knowledge turnover within the economy and society. Dukudis also suggests that the digital era is characterised by intense socio-economic transformation on a scale similar to that of the Industrial Revolution. In basic terms, I believe the digital era is the period of time that we currently live in, where humans use digital devices and the use of technology in everyday life. Firstly, we must consider what digital means. Tech targets state, digital describes electronic technology that generates, stores and processes data in terms of 2 states, positive and non-positive. The positive and non-positive states are represented by a 1 and a 0. Which is also known as binary. Peters states that anything one wants to describe can be expressed in binary, and goes on to say that digital is a top 2,500 word that is used in contemporary English that applies to everything. However, digital devices were not always digital. Stern states that telephones, radio, TV and recorded music began their lives as analogue media. Robinson states that analog is a linguistic relic of short-lived and now little-remembered blip in the history of technology. It's a device which continuously varying data is processed as a continuous stream of varying information. Brand explains that analog is continuous and digital is discrete. If we look at this picture of the evolution of audio, it can be observed that music from 1880 to the 1950s was on recorded discs, which would have been played on record players, also known as phonography. Phonography transforms continuous grooves on a record into continuous sound waves in the air. This led on to the 1960s in compact cassettes, then on to CDs, and now in the present day, iPods and earphones which are wireless. Now we understand what digital means, we must understand when it officially began. If we break history into blocks of time to understand the development, we can see the 4 main eras of history: prehistoric, ancient times, Middle Ages and the modern era. In my eyes, neither of the first 3 eras had any relation to being digital, as I personally think the era is defined by technology. The main focus is with the modern era. Using the same picture as before, we can see that products were created stemmed from a simple idea thought out by one person. In 1879, Alexander Bell created the first type of telephone for humans. At this time, this would have been a massive breakthrough for mankind, as people could now talk to each other from a distance, which is a concept that probably had never been dreamt of. Through this era, the idea was developed, taking us into 1992 with wireless phones, and even further into the present day where mobile phones can be used anywhere at any time, with the use of internet, camera, music and more. Up until this point in history, no device had ever been made, which I think shows the emergence of being digital. However, I don't think humans had quite reached the digital era by this point. Dukudis suggested that the digital era was similar to the beginning of the Industrial Revolutions, which is a good period of history to compare it to. There are 4 industrial revolutions that have happened throughout history. As it can be seen in 1784, factories relied on steam power and railroads for their production. This then progressed onto electrical power and the assembly line in 1870. Then in 1969, electronics and computers ran the factories, eventually leading on to robotics and artificial intelligence nearly 250 years later. From this, I deduced that the last 2 revolutions are digitalised, suggesting they're already within the digital era. I also think this because the first 2 still require people in the process, but the last 2 are independent and humans just observe the work being carried out. Peters advocates the start of the era by stating that digital computing took wing after the wartime invention and subsequent industrialization of information science, which was in 1945. However, in order to get an accurate date, I used Google Ngram and searched the definition digital era. From the image, it can be seen that the mid-1960s was the start, which correlates to the start of the digitalized industries as well as the change from analog to digital in terms of devices such as telephones and music. It can also be noticed that although it started in the 60s, it didn't properly take off till 1990. In my opinion, this is when digital devices started to be advertised and consumed by people, which led to a dramatic impact on their lives as well as creating an economy that flourished. In addition, this image on the evolution of technology helps to see the progression of humans' understanding, again suggesting that the 60s was the beginning, with us being classed as babies as technology had little impact on people's lives. We then enter adulthood in 2010 onwards, where it is fully integrated into people's lives. So now it's understood that this era really began in the 1960s before soaring in the 1990s. But why did people love the idea of a digital world, and why did it appeal to so many of them? Well, now we must consider what the purpose of the digital era is, which takes us to my last key point. Rhetorical language is designed to persuade or impress, such as on the TV, magazines, radio, and on posters. It can also be described as language that is intended to influence people and that may not be honest or reasonable. Considering this in the digital sense, businesses use this type of language in order to persuade people to buy their product, which explains why technology could have soared in the 1990s. Opposing to rhetorical is the term analytical, which means breaking down problems into smaller parts to find solutions. This suggests to me that companies and people involved that developed new technology and contributed to the digital age did so because the world needed to move forward, rather than the need for wealth and success. I believe the digital era started in an analytical way, with scientists and producers creating products to better the world and help ease the lives of people. However, this has changed into a rhetorical sense, where businesses use any persuasive language to make their products appeal to consumers so that their business becomes more successful and boosts the company's wealth. Peters also asserts this idea, stating, "The more digital media spread, the more exacting and consuming our counting regimes appear to become." Although we live in a digital world, the use of technology isn't always in everyone's lives. Therefore, to some people it's not had much of an impact. Looking at it in a global context, the world might not be in a digital era because not all people within the world have access to digital devices. This table shows the number of internet users in the world from March 2017. There are over 7.5 billion people in the world and only half use the internet. Australia and the Middle East are the two lowest using world regions. The Middle East do not have access to the internet as the economy is not as well off as other countries. Australia are an independent country that's very isolated, so as a region it appears to use less internet than other parts of the world. Asia consumes the most internet within the world, which correlates to the use of rhetorical language, as they have a booming economy due to the fast-paced, forever-expanding digital market and products that they produce. It doesn't just depend on where you live or how prosperous the country is. Some people don't enjoy using technology. For example, older generations prefer to use what they are used to and what they know, as they find using anything digital quite complicated and difficult. To conclude, in my opinion, the digital era started in the 1960s with the help of the Third Industrial Revolution. I also believe that the digital era is rhetorical, as the digital market is always looking for new ways to make existing devices better, but for the benefit of the company rather than for the people. From this image of the 4 phases of digital eras, we are continuing further into the era to an autonomous world where everything is created to make people's lives even more simple. Thank you for watching my video.